suggests, a wicking bed is a self-watering system which allows the plants to draw up moisture as it's required. It does this by capillary attraction, which means that the water is pulled from a reservoir below through the soil to then be used by the plants. The beauty of this system is that plants use water as they require it, which is far more efficient than surface watering. With the amount of space available for gardens shrinking, wall garden units are becoming much more popular in the home garden, and like the one sitting here behind us, they're becoming much easier to install. The first decision you need to make is what wall you're going to use for your wall garden. Now you obviously need sunlight, and when setting up your wall garden you prefer morning sunlight as opposed to the harsh afternoon light. Now the idea of installing a wall garden has traditionally seemed quite a difficult one, but these days there's modular systems that make it much easier for the DIY project at home. Installing the wall garden units is attaching the braces to whatever surface you're using. Now this surface is probably the most difficult you'll come across. It's a shipping container, so it's got a slightly undulated surface, and it's also very hard metal. So we'll be using metal screws to attach these, but the same theory applies across the board. The first step is attaching your first panel, making sure it's absolutely level and perpendicular. So make sure you use a spirit level. Spacing between the boxes, from one box to the next, 25 centimeters is absolutely perfect, leaving a little gap for the foliage to grow up and then grow over. The beauty of the modular system is its simplicity. The back of each unit has 2 points that anchor onto the screws that you affix to your panels. Remember that when choosing your plants, choose the varieties that don't need a lot of root depth, so things like leafy greens and herbs will be absolutely perfect. And while it does look a little bit unimpressive at first, give it 1 or 2 months and that foliage will really start to grow out and drape over and cover those boxes and create a really impressive wall garden. Nothing says summer more to us than tomatoes do, and making tomato sugo is as much about tradition as it is about the produce.
That's beautiful smell and it's a nice tasty. That's for Christmas.
First you need to start by sourcing some long neck bottles, and this should start well before the sugo day commences, so definitely invite some friends around for a little bit of extra help. When preserving, you want to reduce the risk of contamination, so the first step here is rinsing out all the bottles with a sterile solution. When you're sourcing the tomatoes, you want to make sure you get the ripest tomatoes and almost on the verge of going off, because it's the sugars in the tomatoes that bring out that sweetness and richness in the sauce. Now if you don't feel like they're ready, you can always leave them out for a couple of days in the sun until they're just about right. When you're preparing the tomatoes, just look out for blemishes on the inside, particularly when they're really ripe. There may be some rotten bits, and you want to make sure that you cut all these out because they can spoil the sauce. Once you've prepared them, it's time to cook them. Years ago we used to put them straight into the boiling water, but there was always a problem with getting too much moisture with the tomatoes when you pulled them out. So now we use just really a glorified pillowcase, which helps drain the water out just before we process them.
Okay, like a good one.
Once the tomatoes have been cooking for about 15 to 20 minutes, it's time to bring them over to the pulping station. Now on the pulping station we have a tricker trucker, that's the technical term for it, which then processes the tomatoes. On one side you get the pulp and the skin, which you then reprocess a few times to get all the juice out of. On the other side you collect all the good stuff that then goes to the bottling station.
Lovely. Well, need salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice.
Now that the sauce has all been processed, it's time to bottle. So in each of the bottles we put about 2 to 3 basil leaves just to infuse the flavour through the sauce as it sits, and fill within 2 to 3 centimetres of the top. And the final step is to put the bottles into a boiling pot of water. The idea here is to stop any secondary fermentation from occurring.
I take to have
Cheers.
Cheers. To have more salt.
Okay.
Maybe you don't like it. Some you don't like it. That's good. Next year, remember, Urian, I proprio no be here.
When you've got a great performing eggplant, rather than ripping it out at the end of the season, there is a technique to help it survive all the way through the winter. Although technically classified as an annual, there is a way in more temperate climates to cut it back to a bare skeleton so that the same plant produces perennially. Cut the plant back hard, leaving the stem and only 2 main branches. With less baggage to carry through the cold, there's a better chance the plant will survive the winter and come back even stronger the following season.